Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digits Live Insider session today. Appreciate everybody joining over lunch hour or whatever time it is for you in your spot. But there is a lot of change happening at Target in the last couple of months. And we wanted to use today to really take a stock of what's changed, where things are at, and how we help our partners kind of figure this out and drive their business. So a few tactical things. One, we do use the Q&A. So we want this to be interactive. There's a lot of change and a lot of questions at Target. So if you have a question for us, pop it in the webinar Q&A, and we will either answer those live or we'll answer them as we go through. So long, windy road ahead at Target. If you see the image here, we had a little fun with some images in here now that everything's so easy in that space. If you're new to Digits, a little bit about us. We are a leading independent retail media agency. We're based out of Minneapolis. We were founded about 10 years ago now, 10 years ago, later this month, actually. So it'll be a big 10-year anniversary for Digits kind of coming up. But we are retail media only. So this is what we do. We are experts on retail media. We are not brokers. And so we have to be experts in this space to help our partners win. We operate a flagship office here around Target. We do a lot of support across the different levers. Specifically for Target, it's about half of our business of what we do helping vendors in that space. We have spread nationally, so we do support brands and clients at Walmart, Instacart, Uber, Kroger, wherever, so we can spread our wings and grow with our clients that way. And then you also see us in the regional grocer space. So we act as grocer retail media agency of record for a few grocers. And so you'll see our email address is helping those folks bring retail media to life in the space as well. One last plug before we introduce our co-panelists today is if you have not signed up for our newsletters, please do that. digitsagency.com. Approximately once a month, we operate a flagship newsletter. We have kind of an alcohol specific newsletter, and then we do some others on more regional grocers as well. So give yourself an educational leg up and go sign up for that, and you'll be part of our program. So now introducing Chris. So Chris, welcome, and welcome to the session today.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Excited to chat Target here. I know we do these webinars pretty frequently, and gosh, what the year Target had, last year, a lot of the focus was around the theme, if you will. How do you weather that storm? Excited that we are now into 2026 and seeing some positive signs here. So yeah, excited to kind of talk through, what that means for the road ahead and how brands can capitalize.
Now, for those of you on the call, you should realize that we're all very lucky today because Chris is taking time away from one of his favorite days of the year, of the Masters. And so if there's any other golf fans, you can, thanks to Gemini, we can imagine what it would look like if Chris won the
Oh no, I
Masters.
did not know this was
Yeah,
tough.
this is news to
Too
you.
good.
So, if Chris had won the Masters with his green jacket, this is what it would look like. But
Love this. I'm showing my kids when they
yeah,
get
there you
home
go. But
from
what
school today.
so any personal favorites in the Masters? Any sort of somebody you're cheering for this weekend? Right.
Would love to see Rory get it done again, and then I'm big on the young kid from Sweden, Ludvig Åberg. I think he's got a good shot here. So we'll see. Always a great tournament to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know it's a kind of right of the spring. Hopefully, I think it's supposed to hit 80 this weekend, maybe here in Minneapolis. So, it might be that time of year that we're going to start to get out on the course and whatnot around here as well. So,
Oh, absolutely.
but yeah, so today's topic, moving into it, is kind of the Target state of business. And obviously, for any of us selling into Target, we know that it's a new chapter from a leadership side. So two big names that are new. So Michael Fidelki, obviously, as new CEO, he took over at the turn of the fiscal. That's been announced for a long time. Michael is a longtime Target person. Carol Sylvester then is the new chief merchant. She also is a long-term Target person. Both Michael and Carol were there in the merch finance world back when I was a merchant at Target. And so it's a little bit of what's old is new again, I would say, from a strategy point of view. And from people that know how Target used to work back in its heyday 10, 15 years ago. And so we'll get into some of the specifics, but I'll tell you, Chris, from my friends and contacts in this space and the people that still work there, there's more excitement and sort of interest and happiness is sort of the way Target's doing than it's been in a while. And I don't know, are you feeling similar thing from when you talk?
Yeah, yeah. Our target network, I would say, has been overall like, very positive of just, the initial roadmap, some of those plans actually being put to place. So it does seem like there's a little bit of a buzz within Target HQ here. So it's great to see.
Yeah. And I think that that's good. And like, obviously we follow earnings calls and announcements, and I know a lot of the folks on this call probably do as well, but we wanted to take a bit to unpack that, and have some conversation around, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for vendors? So, Target outlined four priorities, that are guiding their path forward. Number one, leading with merchant authority. Number two, elevating the guest experience. Number three, accelerating technology. And number four, strengthening their team and communities. From an impact to this group on a day-to-day basis, lead with merchant authority. Obviously, it's number one as far as assortments and strategies and impact. And then it's a guest experience, probably number two, how that's going to come into play. But one of the things that we've seen in this space is that merchant authority. But Chris, from your conversations with vendors, what does that mean? Like, what does that like mean in this space, or what are some of the themes of what leading with merchant authority kind of means to the CPG world?
Yeah, I mean, we're already starting to see it in assortment decisions, and you have it captured well here. Of challenger brands, do have a leg up in that environment. They are bringing in kind of a lot of new and emerging brands. For big CPG, certainly ways to address that within your current business at Target, of just bringing new assortment, Target exclusive, seasonal, on trend types of variations or extension of your line at Target. But yeah, I think just approaching kind of what you bring to Target from an assortment perspective, regardless of kind of where you sit within that national brand hierarchy.
Well, and I think that's you mentioned it with Challenger, and even if you read the small copy on Target's graphic, it says by setting trends with differentiated, culturally relevant assortments. And the way that we've seen that come through is I've heard them talking about TikTok so much more than they used to. I mean, we've sat on some grocery meetings and they're like, oh, this ube trend on TikTok, right? How is that coming into our assortments? And I think they truly want to be like, they don't want to lose in that world, right? And so, like, what that means, things like Dubai chocolate, like that sort of world, like what that actually means on the shelf, I don't know if anybody exactly knows yet, but that's kind of what it means to me is, that's where they want to be front and center with some of that culturally relevant type moments.
Yeah, really looking to lean into those on trend brands, and then we have noted here that what does that mean for the old guard? They have been a little bit more vocal about we're not trying to be an everything grocer or an everything retailer. So to make room for that new assortment, they might not carry every pack size or flavor or variety that you sell. So, definitely some merchandising kind of rationalization happening in that space.
Yeah. And I think that it'll obviously start coming into line reviews, assortment decisions, and I'm sure it already has, but how that's manifesting across all the different buyers, in different spaces. We're certainly seeing it in merchant strategy decks, that we have privy to, that's how they want to kind of make it come in. And within that, the second bucket, so 1B, we have labeled here of in-store elevating guest experience. I mean, Target has messaged a $2 billion investment into the stores. And so through store labor, I know some remodel work, other things they're trying to do in store, and really continue to plant that flag and having the best physical environment, which I would say most of us on this call have probably would say has slipped in the last number of years, and
Hmm.
nobody likes that. Things like the uniform announcement, which I would say for people that follow me on LinkedIn, we posted about the uniform change. It had the most impressions and interests of anything we posted in the last like 6 months. And so the people interest in that in the community is large. And I think hopefully things like that are starting to make an impact in store.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of the things too on the recent, annual earnings call that really jumped out to me. Not captured here, but they really demonstrated that they do have a financially healthy business that is setting them up, to reinvest in improve that guest experience.
Well, awesome. Well, I think, the logical question then is, well, is it working? Or how long is it going to take for something like this to work? And I'd say positive news from our side. So, Digits, we work with suppliers across the store. We have about a $6 billion footprint of impact that we work with. And so we pull sales comps on a monthly basis of sort of just how's our community doing. And it's usually a pretty good indicator of, where Target's at. And I'd say the last 2 months have been the best 2 months. I don't know since when, but like we'd have to look back a long time.
Well over a calendar year. Yeah, and I think brands and Target are clear-eyed about it in the sense that, like, we all know that we're comping softer numbers from last year, but I would say the specific numbers that we are seeing are probably a little bit better than I expected. I was expecting pretty low single digits, and we're starting to creep up to like low to mid now. As of March, our clients were almost a 6 comp, so I think a little bit ahead of schedule from that perspective.
Well, and I think, yeah, the skeptic in me is like, well, is it the new strategies? Like, it can't be the new strategies yet, right? Like, it just. But then the optimist in me thinks, well, momentum is momentum, right? Positive comps equals investment equals just the ball starts rolling downhill, right? And so everybody's life is easier when you pull a sales report and it says +4% to last year versus if it says -2, right? Like that just
Absolutely,
it,
yes.
and so momentum will breed momentum. And I feel like hopefully even if today is a little bit buoyed by a 2-year comp number, that might continue to grow. And then, what we have on paper here is national brand investment, right? I would say our partners, because of Target struggles, I would say have faced some headwinds internally getting national
Mhm.
brand investment, right? Your big Roundel numbers, it's been harder to get that year over year growth numbers. And I would say uh, our push is, well, Target's probably going to, I mean, if this is the start of something, Target's going to end the year positive, which obviously is great. But so how do you start to get ahead of 2027 budgets? Or how do you get Q4 this year budgets where you can start to think of Target as a growth company again? And then fight those battles internally within the space.
Yeah, I think it's good to be thinking about and doing now, just because it takes time to secure the funding. It takes time to activate the incremental funding. So yes, capitalize on this momentum kind of as early as you can would be our recommendation to national brands.
Well, I think even probably most of the big national brands, small guys, we've seen wins and ops across small guys over the last 2 years because, they add a couple SKUs and all of a sudden their business goes crazy. But big CPGs, they're such big ships that it takes a longer time to turn them around one way or the other. That you got to get ahead of it now. And, if you start seeing Target again as a growth company, that maybe puts them in a different bucket internally. It helps you guys all on the call get more funding for your business, which makes your lives easier and helps you drive more business as well. So only in month 2 of it, but a trend is a trend, and we'll kind of start to kind of look this going forward.
We'll take it.
So from a digits, we zoom back out of like, all right, so if Target's business is starting to work a little bit, how do we as digits and how do CPG folk that are working with Target drive their business? How do you do that? And so digits has a 4-pronged flywheel of how we support vendors in the big buckets into Target. So upper left, you got paid search, then you got promotions, then we do our own offsite media, sort of using either Roundel programmatic or using our own third-party programmatic. And then you've got Roundel managed service, where a lot of big CPG puts a ton of money. So these are sort of the 4-prong levers. Chris, which ones are we seeing the most change in these days at Target?
Promotions, certainly. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's changed and how and what it means here in a bit. But that landscape has really evolved. over the past couple of years in particular. Seeing paid search become a bigger piece of the spend, I would say Roundel closer to flat. And then we have seen, definitely an increase in offsite as well as brands kind of look to take a little bit more agency in driving their own business and in traffic.
You know, I agree. I mean, I think we've seen promo. I feel like Target's always very promotional. I think how they go to market has changed a bit over the last couple of years and even the last couple months, honestly, of how they're trying to bring it to life. So let's dig into that. So for us as digits, what allows us to get a lot of the information that you and the call are going to see in the next couple of slides is we operate a Target promo center of excellence. So we run strategy and planning for CPGs. We run operations of actually, filling out quarterly grids, setting up deals, managing that day-to-day operation side. And then we have a full customized reporting and analytics suite for Target as well, where we take every promotion, run them through our pipe. We see what their incrementality was, what their cost was, what their lift was, whichever. And then we publicize that back out to our brand partners. So in total, we're looking across about 6 billion of business. We work across 4 pyramids and we look at 2,000 offers a year. It might actually be more than that, but that's the number that we've had on the slide. So we have access to a ton of information of what's working and not working. And it's like Chris leads all that work for us. And so, Chris, what have you seen in this space broadly before we get into some of the numbers?
Well, certainly changes to Target Circle, and that channel for them has really evolved. And we'll talk about kind of where it started when you launched it over a decade ago at Target, and kind of where it is today. An offshoot of that is the specific types of promotions that are effective today has changed from a couple of years ago in particular. So things like multiples offers are a bigger part of the toolkit we are seeing, just based on how they are managing that and kind of what is available to national brands to, actually support.
Got it. And as you were talking about Cartwheel, but yes, those for those that don't know on the call, that's sort of what got me into this space. And so I worked at Target 14 years. My last 4 was leading out the merchant side of the Cartwheel launch. Back when Cartwheel used to be its own standalone coupon program. That's what really kind of got me into the retail media, coupons, promo, space, and eventually led us to kind of where we are today. But we thought it made sense to map out because was it um, Ace Glenny sent out an email about 2 months ago, sort of just talking about what the future and kind of current state of Circle is. And a lot of our clients or just friends in the industry would ask, well, what does this mean for Circle? Right. And you can't exactly answer that without kind of pulling back a bit and looking at just the total evolution. So that's what we aim to do here with this slide. Pre 10 years ago, it was Cartwheel. Then, it was really an open marketplace for deals. Pretty much anybody could submit a deal. It's a web portal. Boom, boom. You type it in, there's a deal, and it's a standalone app, and it acted a bit more like social media in that space. That was kind of fun and different at the spot. And so that was awesome. Really grew. Around that time is when I left, launched out Digits, in 2016. Cartwheel went from a growth phase, went from 10 million to 40 million users. They integrated into the app. They kept a lot of the capabilities, but it was still really that open source for deal. What started to happen over time is honestly, it got so big that they needed to kind of integrate it and make it more part of the Target ecosystem than it was back when it was like a beta play thing, earlier. So that's the Circle rebrand. And they started shifting it from a promo channel to more of a loyalty channel in that space. And that really continued even more. So, in 2024, they relaunched it as what we now call, full Target Circle. And they introduced this idea of Circle 360. They changed the credit card to a Circle card and really tried to turn it into a loyalty channel. And what we've seen since then is in this 4th phase of, Circle is it's loyalty for Target. It's not as much promo. And as a vendor, if you can't just only lean on Circle anymore, right? Back in 2016, 18, you could submit as many circle offers as you want, really crush it and run a bunch of circle offers. Now you need to really fully integrate TPCs, weekly ads, circles, and you need to take all of that into account when you're planning it out. So
Yeah, I
Chris,
mean, that's really the big theme here, right? Is started as a promotional channel, and a very effective one. And we've got the headline here, efficiency at scale. I think that captures it really well. And over the years, kind of slowly evolved to where we're at today. They are leveraging it much more as kind of a pure play loyalty platform more than a promotional channel. And I would highlight, on the far right too, when they changed to opt-in deals a couple of years ago, that had a very big material impact on just promotional effectiveness and ROI, and kind of, the playbook that worked prior to that wasn't the same kind of going forward. So we've had to adapt to kind of that new toolkit to use that to, make sure we're still driving strong results.
and then with we're hopeful that there's some new things on the horizon. I think for people that come to a lot of our webinars, we've talked about 8112 coupons or vendor universal coupons that could unlock some open vendor marketplace tactics again when that launches maybe later this year. Mm, A lot of TBD-ness around dates there, but look to us as sort of your expert in that space. And so we are, might be able to go back to a little bit more vendor open marketplace, but we'll have to see all that manifests when those new tech rolls out. But so Chris, I'm going to start pulling up some slides with some data here. So walk
Yeah.
us through, this year with our data. What are we seeing for target promo strategy?
Yeah, so early Q1 trends, we are seeing promo activity down, not substantially, but down 5% in total markdown spend. That is a trend that we actually saw through back half of last year. And it was definitely a theme in the earnings call of we kind of saw coming in advance of that Target kind of knew last year was bad. They weren't going to be chasing business. They weren't putting their foot on the gas and running more promotions to do that through back half. Fast forward to the first couple of months of Q1 here for Target, we're seeing a continuation of that. And I think partially for different reasons. Now that we are seeing some more positive comps, Target is not needing to chase that business and manage a more, let's call it, sustainable kind of promotional environment where they're still promotional, but they are not responding to the soft traffic or the declines that they saw last year. So we expect that to kind of remain flat to slightly down through this year. The positive thing that we are seeing is that is opening up opportunity for vendors to run more of their promotions. And generally speaking, as a national brand, your vendor led offers are going to do a better job of driving your own business versus something that Target runs at a category level. That's kind of the buckets that we think of these types of promotions through. You can see here vendor, store wide, and category promos. Category is still a big piece of the pie. You can see over half, but the vendor promo is roughly a little over a third. That's where a lot of national brands should be focusing. How do I optimize kind of within that space, again, to drive my own bus?
Cool. Yeah, and I know. Have you seen ROI changes? I'm gonna pull up the slide that's got some of our stats on it. But how have these compared and changed? From an effectiveness from the numbers we're seeing.
In total, no. But I would say the mix has changed in terms of the types of promotions that are, seeing better ROI today than have in the past. So at a high level, this is kind of what we're seeing here for national brand promotions, dating back to beginning of last year through, first couple of months of this year. And important to call out too that these are not KPIs that as a national brand you can pull yourself from target system. So these are things that as a national brand you do need to measure your own promotions. You'll certainly get promo sales and markdowns, but in terms of incrementality, ROI, lift that you're seeing, that is work that we do for our clients at Target here.
Yeah, we're
In terms
running
of
all of this through our the Tableau program. essentially that
Hmm.
we've customized and built for Target. It's got, the total top line here, with 40% incrementality essentially and a 30% ish unit lift. And then what's really awesome that, even vendors that do look at this stuff don't do is what's on the next page, which is, I'd say, is pulls it out by, types of deals. And this is really what helps you optimize kind of within the space. And so, um, Chris, kind of expand on how we look at it here and what's working and what's not.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what I was alluding to in terms of like the mix has changed, and not sharing specific markdown dollars here, but just noting some of the color coding here from left to right. That is in terms of spend. So highest spend on the mandated multiples. Least spend on the gift card promos, which candidly are not approved for a lot of vendors. Those are a little bit harder to come by, but big theme in this new landscape, and kind of going back to that evolution of Cartwheel slide that we shared. We touched on the change within Circle from opt-in deals to auto-applied deals. That really changed the landscape pretty dramatically in terms of what performed here. It really put more of an onus to be running more multiples offers. Mandated multiples, which if you're not familiar with that terminology, that would be buy two for $10. And then BOGO, buy one, get one. I think folks are pretty familiar with that offer type, but you can see highlighted here in terms of unit lift and ROI. Those have been by far the top performing types of promotions. And again, in this environment where all deals are being auto applied, that does help you maintain some efficiency still. So, driving incrementality through larger baskets, but also not discounting your entire business for, people that are only willing to buy one unit during that transaction. So, from an efficiency side, it's been, really important and helpful to focus on those. That has been the big trend. I do want to be a little bit careful in saying you shouldn't be exclusively running those types of promotions. There are still definitely use cases where you would want to run, a percent off or a sale type of promotion. A new item that you are launching would be a good example of that. You might not want to run a multiples offer, right out of the gate. You're just trying to drive, trial, one unit purchase, and then kind of shift to, that multiples focus going forward.
Right. And, shifting gears a bit, with while we were talking about things being a little less circle, at the end of the day, digits as an agency is very associated with circle. And especially even, we've talked so much about circle, whatever. And so my point is, whenever Target Circle does stuff, people ask us, well, what did we think of it? Right? Like, how did they do? What was it like? We're the circle guys in that respect. Right. And so we wanted to pivot a bit to talk about deal days. So Circle did their, they do what, 3 big events now, unless they
Yep.
change their strategy. And so they just did the big Circle deal days for 3 days, which that in itself is a bit of a shakeup where they had been doing it everything week. So talk to me about what did Target do on this deal days event and how is it different from what they've done before?
Yeah, so you hit on some of the themes here. Generally, 3 times a year. There's one coming up in the summer here, which we are hearing rumors might be moving up a little bit from last year's July week 1 date, and then another one typically in October. You can see big themes here. 40% was kind of the benchmark for depth of discount. They've continued to lean into the daily deals, and I think they've been doing an increasingly better job of curating the deal content within the last few iterations of these events as well.
Well, and to me, I mean, when Circle became more promo in autoplay, it got a little boring, is what I would say. Like weekly ad deals are boring. It's the same deals on rotation, right? And so what I liked about this was the difference, the newness, the giftables, the 40%
Hmm.
off. Like it's only a couple days. Like me as a shopper, I think it actually was like, oh, I might actually look at this versus, for the last 2 years, I think Circle's been a little bit more of the same deals on a weekly repeat. And so I appreciated their efforts trying to make things feel a little different. So, um, I know you liked that too, Chris. What else did you see that you liked or didn't like?
Yeah, so we touched on, and I think there was some good and some things that I think that they could do better. But we'll focus on the good here first. Kind of touched on this. Depth of discount was compelling. It wasn't the same deals that they were running an average week, and kind of just cramming them all into this event. And the categories and brands were on trend, which was nice to see. I know in the past, we would see some of these featured deals and it would kind of be like, how did that brand get, included in the featured deal? And it just didn't seem very, compelling for the guests. And I think this ties back to one of the key strategic pillars of merchandising authority, really seeing that extend into how they are running deals, that these are being curated and thoughtful of how they are approaching that, both from a merch and a guest experience. So I thought that was very positive. Starting to see them deliver on in store. So, I thought they did execute pretty well in store with just signage and, even rotating with these daily deals, every day, kind of rotating though the signage in store. I thought they executed that well. And then, they do have kind of their own, Target spin on marketing and social content. I think that really stands out versus Amazon and Walmart for the events that they run. I think Target, does really well kind of promoting the event, kind of heading into it. So all those positive. For me, the ones that missed the target would be, we've heard a lot on the earnings call from Fidelki and kind of other, new leadership at Target, that they want to get back to being unmistakably Target and kind of their DNA. And I thought they kind of missed, the mark on this event here, where there were a lot of areas where they were, very heavy-handedly kind of comping what Amazon was doing with their spring event. So,
They're
um,
so worried about Amazon with this, right? Like it's like, oh, what date are they doing it? Oh, we're doing it, right? Like they're so worried about it, and they must have a good reason. I know from a CPG side, I don't know if it matters quite as much, but to Target, it matters a ton.
yeah, yeah, and they're trying to either get out ahead or comp the same days that Amazon is running those. And to your point, I'm sure there are some advantages to that, but it felt like with this one, it's getting to the point where the disadvantages might be outweighing the advantages at this
Yeah,
point, especially from an execution point. We saw that at least to the vendor community, they didn't confirm the date or publicly until a little over a week before it went live. And Target has the in-store presence that Amazon does not. So just in terms of being able to execute in store, while I think they did well, I think there's more that they could do in that space, if they just pick a date and stick to it and everyone is kind of working
do it
towards
well.
that goal. Yep.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I think
Um,
on we talked obviously a ton about promo. One thing that I know we've chatted on previously in non-promo, kind of so shifting gears a little bit before we kind of move to our next section is paid search. And so, for our clients and for previous webinars, I know we've talked about Target and this idea of conquesting paid search. So,
mhm.
level setting for people maybe less, day-to-day Target is Target operates a clean search policy, which is pretty opposite of Amazon. So if you type Starbucks coffee, you are getting Starbucks coffee, right? If something's not that brand, it's messed up because Target's goal is to have it be brand pure, as far as search. Now they announced that they're piloting some stuff to figure out if they should move forward with conquesting. And so a couple of categories have been live with conquesting. It's been pretty slow,
Mhm.
and I'd say Target is taking it slow, and very limiting how they want to do it. And so we are excited about the opportunities here, both for challenger brands and for big brands trying to kind of gain share and sort of win new customers. And so I think there's a lot of upside for spend and a lot of upside for conquesting in dollars, but it in current week to week, there's not a lot here yet, and we haven't been told about dates of when it's going to be big, but it's kind of on our next radar as we go.
Yeah, I mean, rollout here has been a little bit slower than expected. They are being, which I think is smart. They're being careful and making sure that they're doing it the right way. But yes, those timelines have been pushed back. I think the recent discovery, we knew it was going to be limited initially to certain categories. We have also learned that in addition to category, the placements are somewhat limited as well. So assuming they do roll this out chain wide at some point here, those will obviously be expanded, but there's just not as much opportunity to actually win those spots here today.
Our initial reco was what, a 20% search dollars increase when this happens.
Yes. Yeah.
And so for CPG folk, whenever that switch gets flipped is sort of, I mean, that is was our initial reco. The inventory today would not justify a 20% increase in
No.
spend,
No.
but assuming they open the floodgates like up more, that's kind of where we had pegged it. But okay, shifting gears a bit to our next context section. With so much change happening at Target, Chris and I and our team often get questions of like, well, what should we be doing differently? What are we doing wrong? What are some common mistakes that people are doing at Target? And so we wanted to keep this pretty conversational, but Chris and I each have two buckets each, so four total that we think are themes that lots of CPG partners are doing wrong or some degree of wrong, if you will, at Target. And so we'll walk through those. But I'd say a quick plug, we'll get to Q&A at the end of that. So if you're burning on a question, pop it in there and we'll look at it. All right. So first one, and this one's got my face on it, so hopefully it's okay. But, what are people doing wrong, if you will, sort of at Target or mistakes?
Yeah. Tell me about this one here, Dave. Trusting targets, these big vendors that might be JBP or KBP status to earn CPG growth and in levers. Kind of what are we angling towards here?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it comes out of a lot of conversations we have with, I'd say your top 50 type CPGs that are JBP, and they express a ton of frustration that I'd say smaller vendors, TikTok vendors is maybe the way I'd frame it, are getting sales plans, they're getting end caps. And so, when we've chatted with Target's response is, well, those are the ones that the shoppers care about. Like those are the ones that they're seeing on social and they want to see in store. So they're the ones driving the growth if you're pulling your Nielsen reports. And so that's what they're going to put on the end cap and say. So I'd say a lot of our JBP vendors, like some of their mistakes are they're not having like a day-to-day, week-to-week growth mindset of how are we going to drive this ourselves, right? Like they're sort of thinking, well, Target owes me 2 sales plans a month, right? And they're like, well, they might not give those to you, right? Like JBP, sometimes you're not always getting what maybe you think you should. And so you need to first drive your growth through like an operational, really hard push and then earn those back versus just like, fairness, type of a mindset or a change in their strategy type mindset. Is Target's going to look at that and kind of think of it differently. So that's what we mean. And, a lot of times we're working with smaller vendors that I'd say are relentless, like weekly. What are my promos every weekly? What are my top search keywords every week? And are really pushing, I'd say, on a more bottoms basis that are earning them 1, 2, 3, 4% comp growth. That I'd say some of the big CPGs are focusing more on these like big events 3 months in the future, 12 months, 2 years in the future. And they're sort of missing that. Well, how am I focusing in day to day and driving the heck out of my business the best that I can with the levers that I own? Uh, that's what this means. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, historically, you make a good point there of like big JBP vendors kind of, assumed that those assets and support and growth is going to be driven for them for Target. So, the theme being you kind of have to drive your own business a little bit more today as a big, JBP vendor than you may have in the past.
Um, I will keep hitting these. So, Chris, yours. So sort of a passive role in the promo process. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, Target really revamped kind of their promo execution and planning process with vendors a little over a year ago now, and it's improving gradually, but I think it's it's been hard for a lot of vendors, especially like we hear from national brands that we don't work with, that it's complicated. There's a lot of guardrails within the process. The lead times are very long. And also the time to like actually respond when Target reaches out for promo submissions, that turnaround can be very quick. And I think we have seen through all those obstacles, a lot of national brands just kind of sit it out. And you look at, well, hey, Target's run all these category promos, that's going to help. But, they are missing out on the opportunity to drive their own business and, run their own promotions. So that's something that we focus a lot on. I think, you do have to be very prepared in that process. When those quarterly submissions come out, you need to have a pretty good idea of what you want to run and execute because, as I touched on there, Target doesn't allow a lot of times for vendors to actually get those in. So being proactive, kind of building shells of plans and getting those in place, and then follow up from there. Like I mentioned, this is a newer process. There are some, kinks in the process still that Target is figuring out on their side. So just as a vendor, making sure you're owning your submissions and your planning and following up with your buyer team to make sure that they're actually going through and running.
Chris, in the spirit of the masters, I'm gonna put one on a T for you here. Which promos drive vendor business better? Category deals or vendor deals?
Absolutely vendor deals. It's not that category deals don't help, but the benefit is a lot more spread out across the category, which is going to include your competitors, especially where they're running a lot of these like, spend 50, get a $10 gift card. Like, yes, you might get in that basket, but your competitive set might be there too. And if you're running your own kind of vendor driven promos, you are funneling all of that benefit to your business. So, super important to win at Target that you are prioritizing that and, running your own promos.
Well, and I think there's a flywheel effect too, along with that, aligning your search, then aligning your roundel programs, right? Versus if you're only running roundel during a
Yes.
category promo, well, guess what? That's when everybody else is running their roundel too,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the way that's set up. So, which actually leads us perfectly to the next one. And so, you know, siloed retail media functions, and what this means to me is we rewound the clock on Cartwheel. If I do that even with RMNs. So back
Mhm.
when Roundel was just a couple 100 million and now it's 2 billion, right? Is nobody knew what Roundel really was or how to do it. Nobody around digital content, paid search, all of these things were new functions. And so most CPGs built teams internally. They're like, oh, my search team does that, right? Like they know how to do that. And so these teams have grown. What used to maybe be 2 people doing search are now a total team and an agency, and they've all grown up siloed. And the problem is I talk to directors of Target sales that can't even influence their own search strategy, right? Like they
It's right.
can't, if some like they're like, hey, we shouldn't be bidding on this because we own 80% of the shelves. And so why am I trying to win that keyword? Right. Like they can't influence that. It's a siloed function that does it.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's, just lack of communication, influence, budget? What do you think the kind of driving factors are there?
I think it's, for the last 5 years, there's been an expertise needed, right? Like it's better to do search well everywhere than to localize it, right? And to do it well at a certain retailer because, it was a smaller budget and it would just peanut buttered everything out. And I think that business, I mean, if you look at Target's digital or penetration, it's what, 25% last
Mhm.
month across our
Mhm.
clients is now that's just everyday business. And so I'd say I'd actually put some of the onus back on the sales teams is if you're not smart with how all that works, if you don't know how it works, if you can't talk the talk and like understand what your strategies are there, then you need to, I guess, because it's such a big piece of your business now, where maybe 5 years ago you didn't have to. And so I actually think CPGs need to put more of that pressure on the local sales teams or local shopper. I'm kind of grouping them together, like the local teams to kind of know how it works, figure it out, influence it, and really help push those strategies on a local budget, at least at how those silos all kind of meet in one point.
I think I like what you said there about understanding how it works. I think, alignment of KPIs is a potential factor there as well in a similar vein. Just we know, retail media, search teams have different KPIs than the sales teams in a lot of cases. The sales teams are looking to, how do I sell 10% more units at the end of the day, whereas RMN teams and search teams, in a lot of cases they're managing to ROAS. So in some cases, in some areas, those are very well aligned, and in others they're not. You can drive very good ROAS by bidding on your own brand terms and serving media up to your already loyal shoppers, but you're not necessarily driving growth or incremental business that way.
Yeah, especially new items, new categories. Those ones, your ROAS numbers are going to look worse just
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have a base business. But that might be what's most important for the long-term health of your business at Target is getting that new item to actually work so it sticks in the
Mm-hmm.
assortment. So, all right, last one. Chris, walk me through this one.
Yeah, maintaining a stale promo playbook, and we kind of touched on this as I think a mistake we see a lot of national brands making, just kind of assuming what worked yesterday is going to work today, and it definitely fits with the overall theme of Target turning the page on a new chapter in their business, and a lot of the changes that we have seen in the promotional landscape at Target. We hit on auto apply already, and kind of how that has led to the emergence of multiples offers becoming more important. So again, just what's working today isn't the same as what worked yesterday. And even what is working today, it's not flip the script and set it on autopilot going forward. It is constantly evolving. Even if Target maintains a pretty consistent promo landscape, you still have to consider and look at promo fatigue. If you run the same promotion for several quarters on end, we do see a pretty consistent trend that lift in incremental sales over time will decline as guests continue to look for and expect that same promotion. So making sure that you're keeping tabs on that, and almost on a rotational basis kind of freshening up your promotions. And then this is where, like, I think a lot of the work that we do for brands at Target comes in, is really important, just from the perspective of making sure that you are measuring that performance and knowing what is working and optimizing against that.
Well, and obviously a lot of these yin and yang together. I think a lot of what you said, my comments around the growth mindset and trying to squeeze out an extra 2-3% of your business just from doing things like promotions better, right? Like you can't always get more assortment, but can you sell 3% more units this year than last year because you tweaked a promo? And how many times you do that, then at the end of the year you got a 2% comp, because of it. And then you're happy with that because a 2% comp against maybe a flat business is great. You're winning share. You have to be able to increase your base business as well. And I think things like this is what helps that happen. And staying focused.
Yeah, and I mean, especially as Target brings in more new and kind of emerging brands like big CPG, long term, that is your opportunity to win, is prove that you have superior unit economics, and that you are driving that growth.
Yeah, and I think even some of the ones that missed the cut that we didn't put on here is probably being a little bit more ruthless on some of the, if you have a new entrant, right? Like what are you doing to help be defensive? And so whether that's conquesting search, whether that's offsite media, there's other things about, probably being a little more ruthless as a brand, trying to win that space that we could have conversation with if there's anybody, that wants a sideline one. But so I think a lot of that taking the bull by the horns, active nature in a week to week, short term mindset is probably where a lot of our stuff pops. And I think it's good that way. We are running long. I think a lot of good stuff. We're probably going to have to call it here. So I would say Q&A. If anybody has questions they want us to answer, feel free, shoot us emails. Chris at Digits Agency, Dave at Digits Agency. Both of us are active on LinkedIn. Sign up for our newsletters. That's all the plugs. That's what I would say, but that's the best way to get a hold of us if you're interested in seeing more of this data or seeing how this, approaches could apply to your business as well in the space. So Chris, thanks for joining. Thanks for the conversation. Enjoy some afternoon masters watching. We'll see how it kind of comes to life. And thank you everybody for coming.